Thank you, Linda Diane. So I will start with regrets I have received from Commissioner Lazarus is not able to be here, and Commissioner Margolis are not also not able to join us this evening. And we are welcoming two new commissioners with us tonight, Kyra Sims and also Julie Boland. So we'll give each of the new commissioners a chance to introduce themselves after we get through the attendance. First, I'll call the roll, and please say here when your name is called. Commissioner Felt?
Here.
Commissioner Fern?
Here.
Commissioner Gordon?
Here.
Commissioner Sims?
Here.
Commissioner Hull? Commissioner Nahidi?
Here.
Commissioner Boland?
Here.
Commissioner Parsons?
Here.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Here.
Commissioner Trudeau?
Here.
Commissioner Dolan? Sergeant Bill Clark?
Here.
Commissioner Cooper?
Here.
Commissioner Liu?
Here.
We have a quorum. So if we could move then to introductions, perhaps Julie, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I'm the representative from A2 Safe Transit. I'm replacing Stephanie Preston. Like Stephanie, I'm a professor in the psychology department at U of M, and that's how I know her. And I have, so A2 Safe Transit, as you probably know, is interested in pedestrian and bicycle safety, especially as it pertains to kids going to and from school. And I have a high schooler who attends community high school. He takes the city bus every day to school, and I transport myself to work in various ways. My preferred method is biking in nice weather, and I take the bus sometimes, and I drive once in a while also. So I'm happy to join you, and I'm really, one other thing I wanted to say is over the last year, I really noticed a lot of transportation improvements, and so that makes me excited to join you all.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that. And Commissioner Sims.
Good evening. I'm Kyra Sims. I am an attorney and I work at Bank of Ann Arbor as a trust officer, but I am the representative from AAATA/The Ride, and I'm replacing Prashanth. I'm very excited to be a part of this commission. It's going to be different than the work we do at The Ride. I'm very excited to get the inside scoop on some of the upcoming projects and have input on that. So thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I'd also like a few minutes for a quick introduction. We have another guest joining us tonight, is the new transportation manager for the city of Ann Arbor, Raymond Hess. So I've invited Raymond to, if you could please just share a little background about yourself, and I'm sure the commission is excited to meet you.
Sure. Thanks, Kayla. Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Raymond Hess. I'm the new transportation manager here at the city of Ann Arbor. I'm very excited to be in that position, very excited to be one of the newest Ann Arborites or Michiganders. I just moved out here from Las Vegas about 2 weeks ago. For those of you who've been to Las Vegas, you might say, well, we don't really want Las Vegas streets out here in Ann Arbor. Don't worry, that's not at all where I come from. I was director of planning services out there for the Regional Transportation Commission, and oversaw the Metropolitan Planning Organization function, similar to like what Watts does. But we were also the transit agency, so I worked on a lot of transit planning as well. And almost everything we did was very complete streets focused. We worked on the update to the regional bike ped plan, and many of the other things that you have before you now. Before I was in Las Vegas, I was in Bloomington, Indiana, a very bicycle-friendly community. I was the bicycle pedestrian coordinator out there with my first job, and then I got promoted up to senior transportation planner and worked on Metropolitan Planning Organization issues. I also worked in Florida on economic development issues in a small community north of Tampa, and was a Peace Corps volunteer in the Ivory Coast, West Africa, or Cote d'Ivoire. I am a league cycling instructor with the League of American Bicyclists, and I am a certified planner through the American Institute of Certified Planners. And I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited about the things that you have on your agenda and the things that you're considering, including the traffic calming stuff that we just had downstairs. So I'm happy to lend support however I can. and excited by the great team that's already here and all of you and the good work that you're doing. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. And I think that completes our introductions and roll call.
Great. So we have time for public input, and Kayla keeps track of the time to keep us to 3 minutes per person. And I saw quite a number of people signing up. So let's go ahead with public commentary.
Hi, thank you all for letting me speak and for the work that you're doing. I'm tremendously appreciative as a longtime user of Ann Arbor city streets by bicycle and by foot. Every effort that you make translates into a safer experience for me and for my family. As you may know, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've made I estimate about 7,000 commuter trips by bicycle along Miller Avenue in all sorts of weather conditions as a year-round commuter to the university from my home. Last fall, I quit riding. I've had so many close calls and hit-and-run experiences that I finally agreed with family members that I should not do it any longer. And so I've taken to running, which has been great for my health in many respects, and it is a tremendous relief and stress while I'm not constantly exposed to distracted and aggressive motorists. Nevertheless, while I'm running on the streets, every intersection that I come to poses a danger. And the most recent was on my way home from work today, where I was nearly run over in a crosswalk. So this is an enormous problem, and we have made many efforts in the city collectively to improve the situation. We've done a lot of things to make it safer, but it is not keeping up with the forces against us. And so in all my years of commuting in Ann Arbor by bicycle and by foot, I can tell you that things are much worse than they used to be, and they're getting worse. We have higher density, so we have more drivers, we have more trips being made, and we have bigger vehicles, more things in the car to keep people distracted from where they're going. And we have just a culture of tremendous aggression and of implicit bias, that the cyclist or the pedestrian is always wrong, that the roads belong to motorists. So while we have these measures that will do a lot to calm traffic in specified areas, I want to recall the experience in Delaware where they had signs that said share the road. And the interpretation of what that meant was dramatically different from cyclists and motorists. And so finally, NHTSA weighed in and said this is no longer a viable option. There are no positive results from these share the road campaigns. I want to keep track while we're doing some of these small measures, at individual sections of town, to remember that there is an unintended consequence. When you make a hawk signal in one space, it says to motorists that that is not allowed elsewhere. So please look at the big pictures of calming traffic statewide. The most effective form of traffic calming is actually automated enforcement. It's not allowed in the state, but I encourage you to advocate fiercely for it in the state of Michigan. Schools of choice, the consequence is tremendous amount of traffic. The most aggressive drivers of all are our parents. I've been hit in the crosswalk as a pedestrian at the school opening, so I know this personally. There are, the university wants to build another parking structure. So my time is up. Contact me anytime. 3 minutes is never enough. It's still 15 years of experience.
Thank you. Who else has signed up?
Good evening. My name is Clark Chernetsky. Last night I was watching TV at about 11 o'clock at night, and along came public service announcement, and it was about crosswalks and about pedestrians wanting to cross crosswalks, and looked very effective. Then I started seeing things say, hey, that looks familiar, that looks familiar. Apparently it was put together by the city, and at the end of it, it said, in Ann Arbor, we enforce yielding to stopping for pedestrians at crosswalks. And I thought it was very effective. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but that's the first time I had seen one of those. And it has accomplishes two purposes. One is it lets people from out of Ann Arbor know that Ann Arbor is serious about crosswalk enforcement. And then the other, just in general, I think it brings the public awareness about the need to yield to pedestrians wanting to cross the street. And there's one other thing on crosswalks. I'm on a local advisory council for the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority, and last week we had a presentation by the man from the authority who was responsible for bus stops. And I had made a suggestion to him, and it came about because I was watching the enforcement on Nixon Road by my house, by Clegg School. And there's a stop there because of the terrain. The bus stop and the crosswalk approach are the same place. They can't really readily be changed. So I made the suggestion that perhaps in those cases where you can't move the bus stop a little bit further from the crosswalk, that there maybe be some signage that would say, please wait for a bus away from curb or something of that nature. Because there were a group of about 5 or 6 students waiting for a bus, but that was right at the time of the crosswalk enforcement. There was a sign out saying, you know, pedestrian enforcement area. And so the cars kind of came up, and some of them were a little confused as to whether they were waiting to cross the road or waiting for a bus. But I think some signage might help to alleviate that confusion and make it safer for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak?
Good evening. I'm Catherine Sponseller. I live over on Antietam Court, and we're dealing with the traffic calming issue on Blewett with the new subdivisions that are going in over Nixon, and people are kind of cutting through on Blewett over to Green Road. And there are people in our neighborhood, as you probably know, who want to put speed bumps and bump outs and whatnot on Blewett without first maybe looking at some other options. And I would like to just offer up some suggestions that before we put speed bumps and bump outs and things like that, which are going to really influence and be detrimental to a lot of the people who go in and out of that subdivision, that maybe you look at doing some signage first. There are absolutely no school signs whatsoever indicating that that Clegg School is there. There's no sign. There's not a sign that says stop sign approaching. There are many things that could be done on Blewett Road to slow the traffic down and to indicate to people that this is a school zone, and you know, you should follow the law of the land as far as 25-mile-an-hour speed limit before actually going to the extreme of putting speed bumps and bump outs in. So I'd like for you to consider that before going to that big expense. And the problem is people who are cutting through are going to find another way to go, and we're going to be stuck with speed bumps for the rest of our lives, and everybody else is going to find a different way to go. So I'd like to just ask you to consider some other options before going to speed bumps. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Kathy.
Hello, my name is Kathy Griswold. I would like to thank everyone for serving and everyone who's speaking at public commentary. I have to agree with all of the statements that have been made so far. And I know that you are a policy-making group that makes recommendations. However, how can you provide some oversight? Because what's actually happening out on the crosswalks, out on the roads, there's aggression, there are problems, and it is because we are trying to catch up after 12 years of having a streetlight moratorium and at least a decade of not properly funding pedestrian infrastructure. We need to focus on those basics and do that before we implement yet another glitzy program that takes attention away from what's not happening in the crosswalks. We need to focus on the basics and we need to fund them. We should never celebrate any accomplishment that hasn't actually been funded and done. We have no lights at some crosswalks still. It is criminal. We have crosswalks without signs, mid-block crosswalks, criminal. We have inconsistent signs at our crosswalks. We have 2 roundabouts on Nixon Road within a little over a mile, 2 roundabouts, and they have different crosswalk signage. The one signage is inconsistent with the federal guidelines, and anyway, it's just really frustrating. We've lost 1 student, and I hope that we can change our focus before someone else is killed in an unsafe crosswalk. I also want to talk about the Huron High School traffic flow change. Huron has existed for 50 years. We've had at least a half-dozen extensive traffic flow analyses, much more extensive than the one that was recently been done. The concept of bus-car separation is not new. We've had it for at least 2 decades. And we are not considering the unintended consequences of that plan. I don't know if the city's even looked at that plan, but we are increasing vehicular traffic through the crosswalk where Justin Tang was killed about 1.5 years ago. And that crosswalk still does not meet minimum standards. It has 2 lanes going in the eastbound direction. So in closing, please fund and have consistent crosswalks throughout the city. Thank you.
Thanks. Who else would like to speak? All right.
I'm David Sponseller. I live on Antietam Court in Ann Arbor. Been in the city a long time. I have 7 children, 24 grandchildren, and with that following, nobody is more interested in keeping children safe than I am. I'm proud to say that in 70 years of driving, I've never come close to injuring a child or anybody else. I'd follow up on what Kathy said about the lack of signs. Suppose you're coming down from this massive new home construction at North Nixon, close to the expressway, and you come to Blewett and you think that's a convenient shortcut to my job in Detroit. I can avoid the whole Plymouth-Huron Parkway intersection by cutting through Blewett. You make the turn and you head east. Before you get to Blewett School, to Clague School on Blewett, before you get to Clague, you will not find one word, not one letter, not one indication that there is a school ahead. If any of you can come out with me tonight and find such an indication, I'll buy you and your spouse a round-the-world cruise. There's nothing there. All that you see is a simple white 25-mile-an-hour sign, and you can be building up to 40 miles an hour. The Chinese garden with all that structure blocks the view of the skew. You can be going 40 miles an hour easily before you see just an arrow at the crosswalk into the front of Clague. So the idea of jumping from nothing to the horror of lifetime speed bumps, to me, is just appalling. It is so illogical to take this vast step without doing what the rest of America does, and that is they use effective school signs, yellow signs, painted crosswalks saying SCHOOL in huge white letters, yellow blinkers like you have on Platt near Scarlett Mitchell, radar signs that give the speed flashing 35, 34, 32, showing the driver's speed. And I observed these in Ohio, and the cars really slowed down. So do the logical thing first before jumping to speed bumps. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during public commentary? All right, then. I'll close public commentary. Thank you for being here. And we will go to approval of the minutes.
And I
So-
think we may want to approve the agenda.
Oh, right,
as
the
well.
agenda first. Any additions or corrections to the agenda? And I'll take a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, and seconded by? Seconded. Great. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have an agenda. Now we can have some minutes, which you've all read carefully. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Great, then I'll take a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
So moved.
All right, seconded by, great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions or objections? Technically, you can vote for it if you want to, but you don't have to. All right, then then you've voted for it, or? Okay. And we have minutes as well. Okay, so from there, we go to the CIP committee report, and Brad's going to take care of that.
The CIP committee met with city staff concerning the 7th Street improvements that are going in. We were joined by 2 area residents who wanted to voice concerns about the project. We had a fairly long and in-depth discussion, and I think that there were some moments where we agreed on some things and some areas where we still disagree. I'm hoping tonight the city might be able to update on some of the things that engineering was going to look at, including whether it's possible to put bike lanes all the way through south of Stadium, to investigate advisory bike lanes through all the intersections, as well as to reconsider, hopefully at least reconsider, the Madison stop sign. But it looks like I sort of deferred to the area residents who were there, and they would like to see the project go through rather than stop it. So it's going to go through. I don't know if Linda Diane has more to share.
I just really appreciate all the staff time and the communication that we continue to have with staff through the committee process in particular. I think it's been helpful for everyone. I'm sure learning a whole lot.
Regarding the request for the staff update, I'll defer to the city engineer whether we have that information available tonight. I don't think that we do. So we'll follow up. We can follow up with the committee directly and then provide an update to the commission.
Well, some of it's referenced in the traffic updates, which we'll hear at the end.
The transportation plan updates.
Yeah.
Thanks. I look forward to it. I want to echo Linda Diane's comment. The communications, especially the written communications, we're really, really appreciate.
Oh.
Not that I don't, the in-person is great too, but you guys continue to put a lot of time and energy into those written responses, and it helps us to get to the kernel of what we need to talk about in person. So I very much appreciate staff time.
Great, thank you so much.
So you've got a copy of that in your packets, and it's available on Legistar to everyone else. Great, then we will move into the traffic calming presentation, unless there are any other questions or comments. All right, you guys are on, and you have 30 minutes. And we wanted to mention, while Kayla's setting up, that at the end of this, we're going to be asking for a task force to be formed. And if I didn't hear from anyone who said that they were interested in the task force so far, but if you are interested, you might want to be giving this a special attention and maybe even taking notes.
So you've just, a handout's been passed around that each of the commissioners should have gotten, and there might end up being a few extra copies that we can share with the audience. It was an additional material that wasn't ready yet when your agenda packets went out, so just wanted you to have that in front of you. And other related material will be referenced in our presentation. So we are here to share the traffic calming program update that staff has been working on, and would like to share it with the Transportation Commission this evening. I'm Kayla Coleman, your staff liaison. I have been working on the traffic calming program in the role of community engagement support for that program. Also, Cynthia Redinger is the traffic engineer that is the traffic calming program manager. And JP Mansoff is a temporary employee in systems planning, also helping with community engagement, and has been a critical member of the project team for having the program updated. So the three of us will rotate through this presentation to deliver all of the material. And we distributed a draft of this presentation with your agenda material, so it should be familiar. There are a couple of tweaks that have been made, so if you see something different than what went out on Friday, that's possible. There are a couple of changes. So we're going to cover a brief background of the program, but spend most of our time tonight talking about the program update, including objectives of the program, the engagement process, project qualification criteria, device toolbox, and some other updates and considerations. So traffic calming is the combination of mainly physical measures that reduce the negative effects of motor vehicle use, alter driver behavior, and improve conditions for non-motorized street users. Essentially, these are engineering retrofits to an existing street aimed at changing driver behavior. And when you talk about traffic calming as a concept, it could apply to any street. When we're talking about traffic calming here tonight, this is the City of Ann Arbor traffic calming program, which applies only to local streets. So we kind of differentiate when we talk about it internally as capital T, capital C versus lowercase t, lowercase c. So this is the concept in general, but a lot of our references to the traffic calming program, that is always going to be specific to the local street traffic calming program. We don't yet, for City of Ann Arbor, have a major street traffic calming program. In terms of program history, it was adopted in 1999, revised from 2005 to 2006, and so that's been the program that's been in place since then, is the 06 program. We did do a report in response to a city council request in 2016. So in November of 2016, there were some questions city council asked about our program. We provided those responses and have, subsequent to that, been working on a traffic calming program update. Also, the Speed Reduction Committee was helpful to provide a specific recommendation around amending the traffic calming program, and we've tried to incorporate that in the program update that's being proposed tonight. And you received a detailed spreadsheet of all of the discussion we've had on items considered, and you'll see each of the Speed Reduction Committee recommendations. You should find those within that, how they were considered, and then what the outcome of the discussion and what's proposed. So in total, through the program's history, there have been 25 projects constructed, 46 projects where a petition was submitted for traffic calming, but it did not qualify. And so that could be, most of the time, that is that it did not meet the speed criteria that the program requires currently. So there's a minimum speed that must be measured in order for the city to move forward with the process. And if there isn't a measured speeding problem as defined by the existing definition of speeding problem in the program, it doesn't move further. There were a couple of instances out of those 46 where a street may have been not actually classified as a local street, so perhaps a major arterial or collector that submitted to the program, and also in a few instances where the neighborhood went through the entire traffic calming program and in the end didn't have the community support to move it forward to the next step for construction. And 2 projects that are currently under review, so Blewett on the northeast side of town, there were a couple of folks during the public comment that spoke about that project area. They have been through their full engagement process, and the one that has not quite yet started, but we have a petition received, is down here. The Scioto Church Service Drive is next in the queue. Our current program resources are that funding is available generally for about one project area per year, and this utilizes the State of Michigan Act 51 funds, which Cynthia will be helpful to explain.
Act 51 funding in the state of Michigan, I'm sure several of you are aware, it is the funding that we receive from the state that's based on the gas tax, and it provides funding for road maintenance and for road traffic control, road or street traffic control. That is the funding source that we currently have for this program, and at this point in time, we are not projecting any changes to that funding source.
And so it's important just to understand that that Act 51 funding is used for a lot of other things in the city, plowing streets, patching potholes, things like that. So there are limitations on the funding that's available. And as the program evolves, and you'll see changes that are proposed, which may result in more project areas petitioning to go through the traffic calming program, that the resources will either need to change, the resources to support that program will change, or there may be a long queue of projects that are waiting to go through the program. But it's just something to anticipate in thinking about how it's funded and that funding availability. So related to that, the current program budget is around $37,000 annually, and this is what is intended to cover the staff time for the program management, so both traffic engineering and also our public engagement and facilitation support, construction of devices, and also the maintenance of existing devices. So the existing program budget is already stressed, I would say, in trying to keep up with what we have on the table. So as we're working through the program update for the local streets program, again, does not apply to major streets, collectors, arterials, we have been looking at industry best practices. We've been looking at things that staff have learned from going through other project areas over the past the many years that we've been involved in traffic calming in this city. So our observations, the feedback that we've gotten from different project areas that we've worked with for traffic calming in their neighborhood, peer community reviews, so what are other communities doing and how can we learn from them? Also the results of the November 2016 report to council, the speed reduction committee recommendations, and then any additional community input. So for tonight, we had the open house in the lobby of City Hall. You saw that on your way in. And we were collecting additional feedback. This is what we were proposing. We're looking to hear whether or not this aligns with what the community is interested in seeing for the traffic calming program. Some of the peer communities that we research, you'll see here on the map. So we've tried to reach out broadly, but also keeping in mind the value of so cold weather, climate communities, other communities that deal with snow, that was important to us. We wanted to look at leaders that maybe are known as being more progressive. Boulder, Madison, Boston was one that was brought to our attention by the Speed Reduction Committee, and we found helpful information in their program. But also to look closer to home on what are other communities that maybe are more similar in the resources that they have available and the size of their community. So looking at the proposed update. So what you see here, again, I'll remind you that through the entire presentation, this is what we are proposing to move forward. We're not intending to spend a lot of time tonight talking about what's in the existing program. We want to focus on what do we suggest move forward. So this is that the objectives would be improve the safety and convenience for pedestrians and cyclists by reducing the speed of vehicular traffic, use engineering best practices and stakeholder engagement to advance Vision Zero principles as adopted by City Council, empower residents to make their neighborhood streets safer through a resident-driven process. So a couple of things, I will just comment on changes from the existing program. You'll see that are not reflected here. Improving the aesthetics of the street is one of them. Let me see, I've got some notes. There were a couple of items in the existing objectives. Creating attractive streets, improving the quality of life within residential neighborhoods. Those were two in particular that we found as there's a wide range, is very subjective on how you interpret what is attractive and what improves quality of life. And we haven't found in our experience working with neighborhoods on the traffic calming program, we found a wide range of perspectives on whether there is favor towards the installation, that this is an improvement for quality of life, or whether this is deteriorating their quality of life. So we had struggle in thinking that that was a suitable objective for the program. Reducing cut-through traffic is another one that you'll see is not reflected here, and we see that more as an outcome of the program rather than an objective in and of itself. And there's additional discussion in the detailed report, and if that's something you're more interested in, then when we get into the staff discussion time, we can come back to that, because I know that that's come up with this group before. But I'll just leave it at that, that you don't see it here as an objective. And there were a couple objectives that we tried to combine into one, things about promoting non-motorized transportation, negative effects of automobiles. Really that first objective, we thought there were a number of similar objectives that could more succinctly be represented together. Engagement process. So the addresses that are included in the project area are those that are within the limits of what the petitioner defines. So this is a resident-initiated process. They define a petition area. We have an example shown on the street. This one is Pomona, which is a street that went through the traffic calming program. And they defined their limits from Miller to Mixedwood. And with the proposed definition of project area, and this is one that was slightly tweaked from what you saw and what was mailed out to you on Friday, so just to pay attention to that. The project area would be all of the addresses that have frontage on the street within those project limits, but also addresses that are 100 feet from where the project street intersects a local cross street. The existing language says something about interior and exterior cross streets. We thought it was a little confusing. We think that it's more clear to say local streets. So for example, Miller is not a local street, and we see that as kind of a break in where that neighborhood exists. So we wouldn't plan on extending an invitation to the traffic calming discussion to those that live 100 feet from this intersection on the other side of Miller. But we would intend to extend an invitation to those that are here across from Mixedwood, because it's possible that a traffic calming device could be placed at this intersection, whereas these devices in the local streets traffic calming program wouldn't be suitable for the intersection of Miller and Pomona. The other thing is the cul-de-sac properties. This comes up quite often, is what level of involvement should the cul-de-sac properties have, because they're certainly affected by the outcome of a potential traffic calming installation. So the approach is that they would be invited for information only, but not to have a participation in the final polling for approval of the program. The reason being is that those in a cul-de-sac may be much more likely to experience the negative effects of traffic calming, as they may see it as an inconvenience through their route of travel, and less likely to observe the immediate benefits because they are on a street that is more tucked into the neighborhood and likely to have lower traffic volume. So they may not experience the same concerns about cars speeding past their home, and less likely to to see that negative side or the reasons why the traffic calming implementation is important. So it's concerned that it would dilute the voices of those who are most immediately affected by the outcome. That's the proposed update then, and that's the way it's operated currently, is to just maintain final polling for those on the immediate project area. So other corridor users are welcome at public meetings, and we just want to, again, emphasize those that are most affected and invested in that project area. So traffic, I'm going to switch over to traffic calming public engagement process. I think that this is always a fun reminder of the range of preferences that we experience. This is not something we have in almost every project area we've worked in. When we go out on street, you have people that love this and are so excited that we're here to talk about traffic calming, and people that cannot fathom or understand why we would possibly come to them for this program. And so there's that range. We value all of the perspectives, and we want to develop a program that gives a chance for everyone to have a fair voice in the outcome. So the public engagement process and support thresholds are shown here in the graphic. We want to establish community buy-in early. So with the resident-initiated petition, maintaining, that's the current process, is a resident-initiated petition. We suggest to maintain that, and to have 50% of the project area sign that petition. So if you're familiar with our existing program, that's 30% currently. You may be wondering why the increase. And I'll jump to the end here with final polling. The current program has a 60% response rate requirement that we're suggesting to, instead of having that high level of buy-in at the end of the program, to move it earlier in the process. So before we go through the staff investment of resources, the community's time, and to set expectations with them that we know that there is an interest in this community, that they want to at least go through the process and see what the outcome might be. So 50% signatures in the project area, that also helps. It truly does result in more successful project areas if people are engaged earlier because they feel they've been included in the full process and they're not getting blindsided by this later on. Then we would go to the initial questionnaire, which is similar to same process as we do currently. We mail a questionnaire to all of the addresses in the project area. We need 50, we ask a question on that questionnaire to say, do you support this continuing to move forward? And as long as 50% of the responses that come back say yes, let's keep moving forward, we do. And it has other questions there, feedback about existing conditions, and that helps staff better understand the project area and what they're dealing with. So one point about, why do 50% of the project area signatures and then the 50% responses, those steps right next to each other. There may be a delay between the petition and the questionnaire depending on the queue of projects that are waiting. So this gives us a chance to check back in and make sure that this is something that the community still wants. So if we end up rolling this program update out, we get many projects that are interested, we can still only do one a year with our funding. It could be multiple years before we get to that neighborhood if our level of resources are maintained. We want to know that they're still interested when we get to them. The first meeting would be structured as an orientation workshop format with an emphasis on understanding the program options. We really want to take time to talk about the devices in the toolbox, how the program functions, make sure people understand the process, and have the opportunity of meeting in a school or a library or some other community meeting space where we could utilize the clickers that the city has, the audience response tools where people can give their feedback anonymously. Again, back to the wide range of perspectives, we find that people sitting right next to their neighbors are sometimes more cautious to speak out. Sometimes not more cautious. Sometimes they're very willing to speak out, but it also has affected community relationships in a way that we want to avoid. We want you to be able to maintain your neighborhood relationships, and this traffic calming program should not break those down. So if you need anonymous feedback in order to achieve that, then that's what we're hoping to achieve with the update. The second meeting would be a walking meeting. That's how it functions currently. This allows people on site to visualize what the draft plan looks like. And that's been very helpful for people to be in the field and see on street what are the conditions and what are we talking about. Final polling, so this would be similar to the current process where we ask, do you support the plan as it is proposed? But now we would provide an electronic response option. Right now you need to mail in your survey card. We've had requests previously, why can't this be done online? We're open to that. We could work through SurveyMonkey or some other tool where you'd still have the option to mail in your survey card or go online and fill it out. And in tallying the final results, our suggestion is that we look at greater than 50% support of the responses received. So this is quite a change from the current two-part criteria. It gets a little confusing. I won't go into that right now unless we can come back to it in the questions, but this is just looking at those who are choosing to participate in the conversation and send back the card. We need more than half of those, just greater than 50%, to move it forward to construction, for approval of construction. The community role in public engagement is to initiate the request, so submit the petition. We're looking for the community to help build support and interest. Provide input about existing conditions and community preferences, so we need to hear from the community about what they want to see. Establish an understanding of the traffic calming program and the options available. And help inform the plan development and the decision-making process. So by participating in the process, giving feedback, that helps to steer this in the direction of what the community is interested in. The staff role we see as evaluating the petitions based on defined qualification criteria, to conduct a speed study, to handle the project area mailings and communications, gather the community input, provide professional engineering expertise, and to develop a plan taking the community feedback into consideration. So the current plan is developed by the engineer, but I think there's an overemphasis at the public meetings. Right now, we do this show of hands thing for how many people would like this device at this location, how many people want this device at that location. And it tends to be more of a majority rules thing that happens in the field. That is different than the way we do any other public engagement on any other street project. So we would like to bring the traffic calming program into compliance with how we are doing other street-related public engagement. So that is to get feedback from the community, you know what you think would work well, what you would like to see on your street, but rely on engineering expertise and the industry best practices and safety standards to make sure that we're coming up with something that is using the resources in the most responsible way, and most effective way. So related to that, where demonstrated safety concerns are identified by professional engineering staff, those decisions about improvements would be made outside of the traffic calming program. So there have been instances in project areas where we identify that there's something a change that needs to be made, and it shouldn't rest on whether or not it can get to that 50% support at the end of the project to move forward. If there is an identified and recognized safety concern, then staff will pursue that, and that's the current practice as well, but we'd like to formalize that in establishing there are other means that will pursue those type of safety improvements outside of traffic calming. We do currently and would continue to engage internally and coordinate with other staff areas, so the engineering department, coordinating there with the Public Works Department also, who handles street maintenance. They need to be aware of the traffic calming devices and make sure that we are not putting things out there that are going to pose maintenance challenges for them. Ann Arbor Fire Department. So it's important that the traffic calming programs not impact any primary emergency routes. Also, the International Fire Code actually specifies that traffic calming devices shall be prohibited unless approved by the fire code official. So we engage with the fire marshal early on to make sure we're developing something that's going to be acceptable for them. They do have veto power according to the fire code. The Ann Arbor Police Department is involved throughout our process. Thank you, Sergeant Clock, who attended some of our Blewett traffic calming meetings. It's helpful to get police department feedback as well throughout the process. The Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority and the Ann Arbor Public Schools, particularly where there are bus routes, we need feedback there. Now I'm going to hand it over to JP to take us through the project qualification criteria.
Thanks, Kayla. So I'm just going to sort of go through our proposed project qualification criteria and go into detail on some of the factors that we considered. So our qualification criteria is sort of a scoring approach that awards points on an incremental basis for different factors, which I'll get more into detail with those in just a bit. Our goal for this scoring criteria was to allow for more opportunities for a project to qualify outside of just the speed criteria, which is where it's at now. And once a project receives 10 total points, it qualifies for traffic calming. So just going to go into detail on each of these factors. For petition support, we're looking at the resident-initiated petition. The petition needs at least 50% of all addresses within the project area to qualify for the program, as Kayla mentioned before. And if the petition fails to meet that 50%, it automatically doesn't qualify, and then it receives more points as it gets more support. For the 85th percentile speed, this is currently the main factor we consider when looking at projects for qualification. And so we're going to continue to use this as an indicator of the speeding problem in these project areas. And just in case you're not a traffic engineer, the 85th percentile speed is going to be the speed at which 15% of all traffic measured is going over. So for example, if you have an 85th percentile speed of 30 miles an hour, 15% of traffic measured is going to be going over 30 miles an hour. So we get this data from a speed study done by the city over 7 consecutive days, and that's avoiding holidays and major events just so we're not throwing off the data with sort of unusual traffic patterns. percent violators is pretty easy to understand, just going by the percentage of vehicles going over the speed limit. So if you have over 50% of traffic going over the speed limit, you're automatically getting those 10 points to qualify. But you are awarded 5 points for 3150, and you won't get points below 30, but you're still in the program, so you can qualify based on other factors. For average daily traffic, we're just looking at the average 24-hour vehicle count from the 7 days of data that we got through the speed study. So the more vehicles driving in a project area, the more points are awarded. So we're also looking at crash history. So any crashes in the project area that cite excess speed as a factor for the crash within the past 5 calendar years is going to give 5 points. That's any speed-related crash is going to get those 5 points. And we get this data through police reports, so crashes without a police report can't be counted, so we have to have that police report on file to count the crash when we're scoring these projects. We also wanted to take into account the fact that schools generate pedestrian activity, so we're looking at whether their project areas within a walk radius of any schools, and that's defined as sort of a quarter mile from the school. So for each school that is within a quarter mile of the project area, it's going to get 2 points each, and there are also other factors. So if the school is adjacent to the project area, like directly adjacent, you're going to get 5 points. If the project is on a published priority school walk route, you're going to receive 5 points. And also if the petition is aligned with the Safe Routes to School committee work plan, that's also another way to get points for schools. In addition to schools, we also wanted to look at other factors that generate pedestrian activity, like parks, libraries, shopping, and community centers. So if any of these are directly adjacent to the corridor, they're going to receive 3 points. Within 1/8 of a mile, they get 1 point for each of these pedestrian generators. And within a quarter mile, they'll get a half point for each one. So that's sort of the criteria we put together. In doing that, we also considered excessive speeding. But ultimately, the data that we looked at showed that we would need to set that criterion as 1% of traffic traveling in excess of 10 miles an hour, which may not be a statistically valid amount of traffic to base a decision on, so we decided not to go with that measure. We also considered peak hour or rush hour speeding, but we also our data also showed that was generally not observed in the morning or afternoon rush hours, so this really wouldn't be a factor that would qualify more projects. And we also considered cut-through traffic, but in talking with other agencies that included this as a criterion, there's not an apparent accurate way of actually measuring cut-through traffic. You can use average daily traffic as possibly accounting for some cut-through traffic, but there's no exact way to measure that, or exact way to measure where the destination of each vehicle is going. And so reduced cut-through traffic may be the ultimate outcome of the traffic calming program, but we're not really measuring that and having that as an objective. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Cynthia.
Thank you. I want to start out by acknowledging that we are running a little short on time. And so I will blow through these a little bit quickly. I believe that everyone did receive a handout that is a copy of the boards that were downstairs, and that goes into a little bit greater detail on what we have here. So some of the considerations that we took into account as we were developing this expanded toolbox is effectiveness of the devices, whether they would, their suitability within a residential corridor, the impacts that they could have on emergency response, impacts to solid waste collection, winter maintenance considerations, access for delivery vehicles, and stormwater drainage type considerations. Any of the devices that have an asterisk on them are new devices. So this device is neighborhood gateway treatments. This is a device that we've used in several of our engagement projects throughout the city, but it's never been an official part of the traffic calming toolbox. This generally would be something that a neighborhood community would take on themselves. It might be within the right-of-way, it might be outside of the right-of-way. It would need to be designed to not have any sight distance restrictions or something like that, but it announces to people who are entering the neighborhood, maybe from a higher speed facility, to just give them that little bit of a contextual cue that it's time to, you know, behave a little differently and make different driving choices. So as with our current toolbox, we have vertical deflection devices, and we have, later we'll go over the horizontal deflection devices. So as a reminder, vertical deflections are things that you drive over top of. Speed humps are part of our current toolbox. It is a frequent device that's used throughout the city, and it's parabolic in shape and allows for motors to drive over it at the design speed. Something that we're adding is the speed table. It's very similar to a speed hump, but it has an elongated profile. So the approaches are identical to the speed humps, but the top section is longer and it's flatter. And this is a device that is very much important to our fire department, as they are responding. If the corridor is a corridor that they're using to make a lot of response runs on, like if it is a corridor that might have several roads that are feeding off of it, they're able to traverse these a little bit more easily. It's a little bit easier on the equipment than the speed humps. So it's a good alternative for them. Raised crosswalks are also similar to those two. It is similar to the speed hump, but the center section is a ADA compliant crosswalk. We also have the raised intersection, and this is also in our current toolbox, and it raises the entire intersection and brings prominence to the whole intersection, including all of the pedestrian crossings at the intersection. So now for our horizontal deflections, and these are tools that you drive around. The first category we have here is our curb extension, curb bump out. And we've lumped quite a few devices into this category. You'll notice it's at the bottom of the page, and there are lots of different options in there. So really, these are any time that we move the curb line into the existing roadway. Quite frequently, it's taking up what was otherwise defined as parking space. In this case right here, the curb extension is allowing for a narrowed pedestrian crossing. And this application is something that provides visual narrowing so that, you know, you get a squeeze on drivers, they do slow down, and it also provides an improvement for pedestrian safety. Also improving pedestrian safety are pedestrian islands and medians. This is a device that's new to the traffic calming toolbox, but it is a device that we use throughout the city. So we are just officially adding it to the toolbox here. Residential traffic circles are a device that we also have implemented and has been in our toolbox for many years. And this is a tool that is designed to sit in a conventional intersection. Most often they are in four-legged intersections. And this does not change traffic control at an intersection. It's just something in the middle of the intersection that you do need to navigate around. Compact, urban, or mini roundabouts are something that we are adding to the toolbox. It's a roundabout, and some of our intersections, you can actually install one of these rather minimally because it's a really wide intersection. Other intersections, it would require a good bit of rework and be a little bit expensive, but this is a standard roundabout with yield on entry traffic control. We have included the pedestrian gateway treatment in the toolbox. And this is a new device to the city that we have been using with great success. I do want to make sure that everyone understands that when we deploy these devices, it would need to meet the crosswalk design guidelines that we have gone through a public process and put in place. So what are we not including? And this list is a list of things that frequently come up in our community engagement that we do throughout the traffic calming program. So temporary permanent radar feedback signs. as this program is really looking at capital investment to create permanent change, this is not a device that we're looking at. Marked crosswalks outside of something associated with a device such as a raised intersection or a raised crosswalk is not something that would be part of this funding. Speed limit enforcement would not be part of traffic calming either. Diverters and deterrents. I imagine we will get into some discussion on this. We are not including this item in the program, and a lot of that has to do with the current funding source because it is road maintenance funding. So if there were a location where there was a safety concern and we had a safety need to address, then that would be addressed outside of the traffic calming program, but otherwise the program is not designed to impede access, but to create an engineered driving environment that encourages a better driving choice. Other things that we have not included in here is to say active transportation priority elements, and we were kind of thinking of that as things like additional sidewalk type facilities like that that are covered under other programs. Speed cushions we looked at, but ultimately decided that we were concerned about winter maintenance with those. Additional speed limit signs, while that's something that can be pursued through the engineering department, is not part of this program. Traffic signals, also not part of this program. Stop signs, you know, those are traffic signals, stop signs are both forms of traffic control, like regulation of right-of-way, not part of this program. And street closures, for the same as diverters and deterrents, we're not considering as part of the program. Are we turning this over or am I going? All right, so some other updates that we are looking at. Actually, I haven't prepared this.
I was going to. You just seem so ready to. So other program updates is that we would advertise that there's a 2-year resubmittal opportunity. So right now the existing program doesn't say anything about resubmittal, and we found that when we have spoken with petitioners after they've been through the process and they didn't reach the point of approval, they hadn't realized that they could resubmit, and the city has generally always accepted resubmittals. It's just never been stated on our program. So our past practice has been to ask 3 years. We think in comparison, I think it's the Washington County Road Commission we compared with, they do a 2-year requirement. That seems suitable. Local street defined by national functional classification. So right now we use Act 51 as the definition of what is a local street, because this is a local street program. This suggests we would change to, instead of thinking of how that street's classified for funding purposes, to think about what is the actual function of that street. Seems a little more appropriate when we're talking about the traffic calming program. And an additional item proposed in the update is to request that council authorize the administrator or designee to manage and maintain the program. So similar with other projects throughout the city that do not go to council for review and approval of individual projects, this would remove the need for city council approval on individual traffic calming projects. It would also remove the need for city council approval on changes to the program, which may improve the ability to stay flexible and adapt to new changes and innovations in the industry. So for the existing program hasn't been updated since 2006. It's, I would say, quite out of date and ready for an update. We anticipate that having it within the administration and not as a council established program may allow quicker and easier changes. So we can be more efficient and more flexible in that. Okay, so those are our program updates. Wrapping it up. Our next steps are, we had the community-wide open house held this evening before the meeting here with you tonight. We're also preparing an H2 Open City Hall topic, and I anticipate that it will be posted by tomorrow. But notice will be sent out to all of our identified community stakeholders, anyone who attended the open house tonight and signed in on the sign-in sheet, and all of you, of course, will be invited to participate in that H2 Open City Hall topic for additional community feedback. We will plan to run that for 2 weeks. And as Linda Diane mentioned, forming a traffic calming task force. The suggestion in the charter is that the recommendations from that task force would be due August 1st, and that the Transportation Commission would be able to take action by August 15th, and then to City Council on September 4th. This is the target timeline. We'll adapt as needed, but something to keep in mind is that we do need to get through the program update in time for it to be incorporated if we're going to be making any changes in budgeting requests to have funding change to support the program update. So this was the timeline, and speaking with our financial staff, that this would allow enough time to get feedback and still incorporate into the full year budget cycle that's coming up. That is all that we have prepared, and we're now available for questions if you're ready to move into that.
So we budgeted about 10 minutes for questions, and that, I think that makes it partly obvious why we're suggesting that a task force take this on as well. So we don't have to answer everything tonight. It's a pretty important and complex area. But let's see what we have to say.
Can I ask, how many petitions do you get a year under the current program, and do you expect that to increase or decrease?
3 to 4, is that what you said? Yeah, I would say about 3 to 4 per year.
So
I would expect it to increase so what we intend to do if the program is updated is notify past petitioners that have submitted and that we're not, so what was it, 46, I think, project areas that submitted for traffic calming and did not achieve traffic calming implementation, to let them know the program's been updated. There's a new program they can resubmit to go through.
So suppose you got 5 in a year and you had funding for 1, but maybe 3 of them met the criteria, so you'd pick the one that had the most points, as I understand it?
The way our current program operates and what we intend for the update is a first come, first served basis.
Oh, the first one.
So the first one that comes in is the one that we do first.
All right, gotcha.
So that is the reason being that if there is a problem based on the defined criteria, then it's a problem that should be addressed. And so not wanting to let project areas that have a lower score get continuously shuffled to the bottom. They may
Right.
never reach that point,
Right.
but they still had an identified problem that we want to be able to work through.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can just read my questions, and if follow-up makes most sense, that's fine. But in looking at the points rubric, is there any way to make average daily trips a multiplier of percent violators? It seems as though if you have a lot of trips and 25 of them are still speeding, that's a greater number of speeding cars and a higher risk of incident. So a thought.
Yeah, we can look into that.
Thanks. It'd be interesting to know what are the risks associated with each of the tools. For example, I know at the Yoast residential traffic circle, some neighbors have concerns about it directing traffic closer towards the crosswalk, which causes motorist pedestrian conflict. So it'd be great to just better understand risks associated, not just the benefits of each. And then for resubmittal with the new point system, would everyone be given a blank slate, or would you? Okay, great, thank you.
Because it's a new program, so you mean they wouldn't have to wait the 2
Exactly.
years?
Yep.
That's our intention, is that this is a new program, so they previously would have applied to a different program, and as this is updated, that would wipe the slate.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
So for both petitions and for the voting polling, how does one qualify to vote? Is it by are you a resident? Is it by household, by parcel? Like, how does that?
It's based on the defined project area. So all of the parcels that are fronting the project area, plus the parcels within that 100 feet.
Well,
You're asking about
I
renters
understand how.
versus
Yeah, I understand how.
So
the,
renters and
yeah.
homeowners both have, I couldn't find our slide on that, but, so a renter and a property owner both would get mailed the final polling card. They would both be invited to all the public engagement. So if it's a rental property, they're essentially getting double the vote, because the property owner and the renter would each receive a polling card. But we don't see a fair way to get around that. We don't want to exclude those long-term renters or short-term renters that have a vested interest in their neighborhood, and also those who have purchased property and may have concerns about impacts to property values or how it impacts their long-term property. They should also have a say.
All right, so each property owner gets one vote, and then if there's a renter of an owned property, the renter potentially gets
There would be
their
one
own
vote if
one
it's
vote
for
the entire household.
Yes.
And then if
the
it's
number of units, actually. If
Right.
it is addressed as separate units, each unit gets a card.
right, so each household. So if there's multiple homes or multiple units in one parcel, there would be multiple votes. Okay, that makes sense. What if there are multiple owners?
It would be
one for the ownership interest. Okay,
Right.
that was just, we're super curious how that was going to break out because I could see lots of ways
Yeah.
to game that, and
Yeah.
I've heard some stories. So
Good question.
Did Eli? Did you? Okay, Brad?
I'm looking forward to future conversations, and I'll just go ahead and volunteer now for the task force.
Really?
I just want to say some points, and I don't know if we necessarily need a response, but this is sort of what you can look forward to, I guess. I'm also glad to hear that I am not the only person who thinks speed humps should be last resort, not first choice. I look forward to having those types of conversations. What I do want to remind folks of is that while this is Act 51 funding, 80% of road maintenance costs and construction, I believe that was what we were told at the very beginning of this commission, 80% comes from millage money. This is property owners within the city and the county who are funding roads. And I know Act 51 is a separate one, but we need to drastically increase this budget and find a different funding source so it's not tied to Act 51 constraints. The other thing I want to mention, I'm the only one left who made the recommendations from the Speed Reduction Committee, but one of our recommendations was to establish qualifying criteria aligned with the main program's objectives as listed by you guys, by staff. And now you're saying, we're going to remove quality of life, attractive streets, and cut-through traffic. 3 that were the most meaningful for me personally, and I think for the others. I understand that there's subjectivity to some of those, and I think we should let neighborhoods decide what they might want to have as an attractive street, but that has to be part of this equation, at least in my mind, especially quality of life. And cut-through traffic, I just want to mention that it was expressed that there's no exact way to measure this. There is, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of money, and there's possibly privacy concerns. I get that. Baldwin has applied twice for traffic calming and didn't get it. It's such a short stretch that I could literally shout blue Corolla, and you could say, yep, they exited. Red Firebird, yep, they exited. Like, I know that there's cut-through traffic. We all know that there's cut-through traffic. And just to dismiss it out of hand, this seems, I don't think that that's the right direction here. Final thing I want to say is that this question of diverters and active transportation priority elements is right in line with what the 2 speakers on Blewett Road were talking about, in that we need to signal to drivers that this is a place where they're going to find pedestrians and cyclists and school children. And I think that that's the direction that I personally would like to see things going, but I think that's how we make our school zones safe. Most of these roads that are requesting traffic calming or have traffic calming have school-age children currently being driven, right, because they don't feel comfortable walking and biking. Like, I think we need to really dive in and get at it through those angles.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions or comments? Now, I wanted to, you start off by saying basically the budget for this annually is $37,000. And so, obviously, that's a huge issue, is there's not even close to enough money to begin having a meaningful calming program in Ann Arbor. And so that, I would move that up to one of the top priorities, is got to find a lot more money for this. And that would be my main concern. Because you're also going to get a bottleneck of people neighborhoods who are interested in applying. I'm also taken by the concept of the brilliance of Ann Arbor in general, the people who have ideas and who can contribute to the coming up with the plan and the solution. And so I think that that's a good start, but I would put a little bit more emphasis on that as well, that the neighbors themselves are spending way too much time talking about this and thinking about it and waking up at 2 in the morning going, aha, I know what to do. And it'd be great to hear more of those ideas somehow and get not just these participation groups that you've got already set up, but really get them involved in some of the process. I think there's a great educational opportunity there too. Because the thing that I find the most frustrating about Nextdoor and getting emails and calls from people and whatnot is people need to learn a whole lot about engineering and about what the staff truly is doing, and also what the standards are and all these other things. And if they were more involved on that, let's work it out together process, then they would actually learn that and be better prepared for the next time as well. So I'd like to see that component increased. That's my comment. All right, then should we move on to talking about the task force? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All three of you for the presentation. Would we like to have a task force? If there's any commentary or discussion about that, or we can just go ahead and move. I see a thumb being up here. And that's be careful, you go on record, Zach. This was a proposal that I submitted and Kayla improved tremendously. Any thoughts?
I think it would be great to have a task force that spoke more on these issues. And I would like to be a part of that discussion. I would prefer not to lead that task force.
Okay.
I'll put that out there.
And it does allow for 2 community members or so as well, which I would appoint as part of the task force.
Depending on timing, I'd want to know when we meet, just because I serve on a lot of bodies, but I'd be happy to volunteer if it works with my schedule.
Great.
And if those 2 to 3 meetings are flexible, like if they're not necessarily the first Tuesday of every month or something, that makes it a lot easier.
So far, we've been very flexible,
Okay.
just as long as there's plenty of public notification.
Yep. Then
That's the main, that's
happy to
the
help,
main
happy to
sticking
learn.
point.
Yeah.
It's a good sticking point, but it's a necessary one. Any other comments on this? I would really appreciate the in-depth look. Well, are we ready to vote on the proposal? If there's any changes or additions, corrections, anything that you'd like to add?
So as the members of the task force would be Bradley Parsons, Councilmember Ackerman, and then are you able to appoint the community members this evening? Or were you planning to do that at the next meeting?
I don't think I need permission from people to do that. I've identified and talked to one potential member who happens to be here as well, so.
Okay.
I haven't identified the second one,
Okay.
so I can do it
And
either way.
I believe it's in the bylaws, I don't have them in front of me, that the chair is to appoint those and the commission approve. So if that is the case, then that would need to take place at the next meeting, but if it's, I can look that up.
Okay, well, the person who I did speak to with is Clark, who's here. I've forgotten your last. You what?
Your timetable on this is such that I would not be able to do it.
You won't be around in the next few months. Okay. Then I've got some people in mind and I've not talked to them yet.
Okay. We could form the task force with the commission members, and if we find out that the community members, if it does need to be approved, those appointments have to be approved.
Okay.
Then they would just need to join in later.
Great. So I'll take a motion to approve the formation of this task force.
So moved.
Okay. And seconded by, okay?
Was it moved by
By me.
Brett? Oh, Boland, thank you. And seconded by,
Zach.
thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we have yet another working committee. I hope that your output's as great as all the other working committees, but Brad's on all of them, so.
The last one. Don't make Bike Boulevard committee.
And I'll join you guys as I'm able to, so.
Thank you.
Crescent has been helpful to have the bylaws on hand that members of the committee shall be appointed by the chair and approved by the commission.
Okay,
So we can then revisit that at the next meeting when we're prepared to add additional community members.
okay.
Okay, thank you.
Might want to chime in that is going to complicate August 1st as a deadline for a report. If we're not even forming this officially until July, mid-July at that.
So I would suggest one option is the committee could, you've established the committee by the motion you've made with the two commission members. Members of the public are always welcome to attend committee meetings. And so if there are identified members of the public that are looking to possibly be appointed, they could attend and participate at the discretion of the committee. We've been rather informal in other committees and allowing public participation at those. So those meetings could begin and then formally acknowledge those members of the public as committee members at the next meeting.
I agree with that, and if we run into trouble, we can change the timelines if we need to. All right, so now we have a Transportation Commission, it was Eli, right? It's next?
Yes, Eli is next. So Eli will be sharing some information about the transportation plan update, and there is also a resolution for the commission to consider taking action on.
Okay, are we, Madam Chair, ready?
Yes.
Good evening. For those of you at home, I'm Eli Cooper. I'm the city's transportation program manager, and I'm pleased to report, and I'm going to speak from my seat because there's no materials. We felt that for the benefit of the commission, the resolution and the narrative in that packet was an adequate basis because we have presented to the commission historically about the city transportation plan update, the recommendations that go back to the Pedestrian Safety Access Task Force for a Vision Zero approach, the city council direction towards Vision Zero. So staff did release an RFP back in April requesting interested bidders to propose to undertake this effort. Staff received 3 proposals. Selection committee was constituted, comprised of our traffic and transportation staff, including traffic engineers and myself. We had Brett Leonard from the city planning staff, as the city transportation plan is a part of our community master plan, and Ryan Buck as a non-city transportation professional in the community. We were also joined by Commissioner Gordon. Unfortunately, his engagement started after the first round of selection process, but I think he can speak about when he joined us during the interview and ultimate deliberations about our recommended or selected firm. The process, as I described, included a committee, We reviewed the proposals that were received based on criteria that were enumerated within the proposal, the project team's qualification, past involvement with similar projects, a proposed work plan, and for those in the competitive range, their fee proposal. We had, after the initial opening of the proposals, reviewed all three. Two were deemed to be within the competitive range and were invited in for interviews. The interview process allowed each firm to make about a half or up to a half hour presentation. They both used the full amount of time to share with us the introduction of their team members and their approach to the project. We followed that with questions, trying to get a better understanding of any issues that any of the selection committee members felt were not addressed either in the written proposal or in their oral presentation, and also to get a better understanding. Following that process, the committee reconvened to review our information gathered both in the written form and through the interview process. So we didn't just have it and sit down immediately thereafter and say, hey, but we actually had some time after the interviews. I know there were some follow-up considerations related to, for example, one firm had identified that they did work in many other cities, Vision Zero work. And I know that in our deliberations, we had heard of folks who had, on our selection committee, that reached out to get a better understanding of how those firms worked in those communities. Following all that, it was recommended that the firm, it's a name, Sam Schwartz, so it's not an individual, it's the name of a firm, would be recommended. The strengths of their proposal overall is that we're looking for a Vision Zero planning process. They are a Vision Zero in bold, all caps, project team. We did see in some of the other proposals some identification of Vision Zero expertise, but Sam Schwartz has, in their proposal, identified many other communities, Chicago, Seattle, Hillsborough, MPO, the Tampa metropolitan area, other Midwestern communities that they've participated and developed Vision Zero plans. They had a strong analytical process with very interesting and I think very informative graphics that really helped to separate them from the others, that they knew what they were talking about, and they had very effective graphics and tools to engage with and inform the community, at least the communities they've worked with. I think it will play well here in Ann Arbor. Their public engagement was not only including the graphic strength, but they identified how, once the stakeholders are known, how they actually go to the stakeholders and convene and conduct pop-up sessions and the like, with the sensitivity to, in the transportation world, what we call environmental justice or equity considerations, which was also of keen interest to our committee, that these folks understand that we have to reach out and be proactive to engage our entire community. So overall, I feel very comfortable that we have selected or are recommending selection of a very high-quality team with a lot of experience. As to the next steps in the process that we as staff will go through, we're still in the midst of negotiating with Sam Schwartz. They did have some optional elements in their proposal, and we've asked for them to flesh those out. That would include an even more inclusive public participation process, and we'll see what that looks like as we begin to bring this forward to council. There's administrative detail, all the boring stuff like certificates of insurance and contract language that is to be reviewed and developed. But that with the process as it's moving forward, we're looking for the commission's support for our recommendation to advance Sam Schwartz to council, and with your support, we would be looking for the packet of materials to be coming forward, probably hit a council meeting in August. Work beginning in earnest as we enter the new academic year in September for those who have students in school. That concludes my presentation. I'm ready to answer any questions that the commission may have, and you might want to hear from Commissioner Gordon, who was a commission liaison to the selection process.
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks.
The day of the interviews, I left that first day thinking that I did not want Sam Schwartz to be the contractor because I was so familiar with the other team. They've worked on many other projects in Ann Arbor before. Two things happened to get me to come around to use Sam Schwartz. Number one, am I happy with infrastructure right now in Ann Arbor? Not particularly. So maybe we should look outside the normal contractors that we use. And number two, I'm the person who reached out to Seattle's transportation department where I have a friend. And they think that Sam Schwartz is wonderful. And if you've been to Seattle, you'll see in the last couple of years, you'll see all sorts of signage for Vision Zero. So those two elements swayed me. And I'm really excited to work with this organization. They seem to really know what they're doing in terms of not just Vision Zero, but a broader view of what Complete Streets really represents.
All right. With that, yes.
I just want to point out, I agree with everything that Eli said. I can speak to it because Sam Schwartz was actually my former employer in New York.
I did not know that.
I actually asked Kayla once in reviewing the materials in advance of this meeting if that presented a material conflict of interest, and it turns out it does not, because as a former employer, and I don't have any vested interest in the in the firm anymore. But that being said, from a abundance of caution, I still would prefer to abstain from the vote. But I don't disagree with any of the conversation that's happened thus far.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Then I'll take a motion to adopt the resolution, which is in your packet. It's at the bottom of the TPU Update Action for Transportation Commission draft PDF. Who'd like to move that?
I can do it.
Okay. Seconded by, all right. Any other discussion? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And we have an abstention? All right. Then it's passed. Thank you very much. Thanks for working with that committee, Robert.
Pleasure.
All right, I have to go back to the agenda. And it's getting later at night. I'm going, what are we doing now?
I believe up next is the capital improvements plan.
Okay. And we gave Deb 10 minutes for this. Oh, even better.
Let's see if I can do it. So Deb Goslin, Systems Planning Unit, Capital Improvement Program Manager. Of course, the commission already has a CIP subcommittee that's been actively engaging with staff throughout the year. And kind of the tack you've been taking is to identify specific projects where your input can probably have the maximum input or impact, I should say, on transportation policies. So tonight I'm not here to talk about specific projects, but kind of to give you a quick update on where we are with the CIP schedule, a couple of things that have changed, sort of activities coming up in the short term, and then give you an opportunity for general questions and answers and input about that process that you might want to share with us. So this is a full CIP plan year, and what that means is we're going to consider 6 years, and that will be fiscal years 2020 to 2026. And that process will formally begin, usually it's heavy in September, October. Plan goes to Planning Commission, typically at a public hearing in December for action, and then would become the basis of the budget for City Council to approve capital budget the next spring and each year thereafter. So one of the things that the commission had given input on is they said they would like to see splitting what was alternative transportation into transit and active transportation. So, you know, Kayla gave you lots of different things you could click on, and if any of you happen to look at the current plan in preparation for fall, I've already made that change. Kind of interesting, and I think it accomplished your goals of saying, let's get these big ticket transit items separated out so we can really see what we're spending on active, meaning pedestrian and bike primarily. So we took care of that. And then Eli Cooper and I have been having some conversations, and he is having an intern start into a process of going through the current transportation plan and non-motorized, which are the plans you're about to launch into the updates on, and look at, in the currently adopted plans, what do we get a check mark on that's already done? What specifically is still in there that's not done? Now, you will be looking at all that as part of the plan update, but there may very well be things that the direction is pretty clear that they're going to advance forward, so we can begin to look at additional projects based on those that could potentially be added to the capital improvement program this fall. So those are the key pieces that we're working on right now. And so we use a prioritization system. We kind of gave you a reminder of what that is. So we're really looking at, and it doesn't need to come tonight, but with September being our real beginning of the work thing, if there's any input that the commission has on potential changes that you might even want to see to the prioritization system, or you know, maybe a programmatic element when you review what's already in there that you think maybe is missing. So more general feedback on things you might like to see come up for consideration in the process this fall. And see, did I make my 5 minutes? I think so.
Nice job.
So, but again, really wanted to have you have a little opportunity here. If you have any general feedback above and beyond the subcommittee looking at specific projects that you might want to share with staff, or at least start thinking about, and you could share it through Kayla or in some more formal manner going forward. So I'm just going to open it up to you folks.
All right, we have 10 minutes for questions if you'd like. You had a question.
Yeah, I have a newbie question. What does priority 0 mean?
Oh, you mean if it scores a 0?
Well, the prioritization model rank is the column I'm looking at.
Oh, okay, sorry. What we're saying is, in most cases, it's like if it's kind of neutral, it doesn't earn any points. So some of them have 1s as the bottom, but actually, I take it back. Last year, we changed them all to be 0s. So it's just like, it's neither, it doesn't deserve extra points. It doesn't deserve anything taken away. It's kind of neutral is the 0 point. Good question.
Yes.
Maybe we could talk outside of this arena
Sure.
if we want to save some time. But the question I have is, how is a program like the Sidewalk Gaps program that's ongoing, how is something like that set up, and could we potentially involve the traffic calming additions potentially into the budget, as well as connecting that possibly to active transportation corridors and what I assume is going to be coming out of the master plan, that we're going to be doing some things that require some money that aren't in traditional funding pockets right now?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I'm going to refresh one kind of baseline criteria for getting in the capital improvement program, which is likely to, from what I heard earlier, could change and move traffic calming into it. At this point, $100,000 capital improvement is sort of the baseline to get put in so that there are not smaller things. Right now, if the budget is 37 or whatever I heard, if the budget is increased such that that would justify an annual bucket, as I call them, for traffic calming, or, I guess it wouldn't gain anything to put it in there if it stays at its present budget, but that's a good thing. And then certainly, I would expect that specific capital improvement projects will arise from the transportation plan updates. That's where a lot of things in here came from in the first place, not 100%, because day-to-day transportation needs come up above and beyond the master plan sort of level, but yes, I think I'm adding additional and potentially traffic calming getting a presence in here. Any other questions? And again, you got a couple months before we get into it, and if, especially the subcommittee thinks of anything else they'd like added or put into consideration, the process is such that we take feedback from community groups, from staff, from citizens, so the commission is no different. If they have specific ideas to channel, we'll be happy to consider them.
And we got what we asked for, which was a whole lot of detail that takes a lot of work to get through.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good. All right, and now we have a presentation concerning the AAATA millage, I believe.
Yes, so here with us this evening, we have Matt Carpenter, who is the CEO of the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority. So I'm actually kicking off the presentation to him, but I just want to make a few quick comments before I turn it over to Matt that I'm sure Matt will expound on during his presentation. But in 2014, a millage was passed before this commission was formed at 0.7 mill rate to fund some expansions of the ride services. And kind of our slogan and tagline for this millage is promises kept. So we did what we promised in 2014 where we expanded service hours, ridership is up, and what we are asking voters for is a renewal of that 0.7 mill rate, not an increase. And we hope that all of you will go out and vote on August 7th in support of the millage. And I will turn it over to Matt.
Thanks for coming and sitting through the rest of the meeting.
It was educational. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the commission, members of the public, Ms. Sims. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I haven't yet had a chance to visit the commission, so it's a wonderful thing to learn a little bit more about you. I really can only add some detail. Ms. Sims, I think, has really summed up what we're here to speak about this evening very, very well. Really just to provide you with some information about a subject of interest. The ride will be going out for a renewal of a transit millage this August. I'm just going to provide you some background. So as Ms. Sims said, in 2014, we did ask the voters of Ann Arbor, the city of Ypsilanti, and Ypsilanti Township to consider a millage increase to expand public transit services. And we were very happy then in May of 14 to see that pass with about 71%, not that we were counting, support. That was 5 years ago. We've been very busy since, and we have kept our promises and delivered every single one of the services that were itemized in that proposal. The cherry on top was just this last January when we implemented an express service from Ypsilanti Township, sort of down on Huron, south of 94, into the U of M hospital in downtown Ann Arbor, and that was the last bit. So we're very happy about this. This list on the slide simply goes into more detail about many of the services that were provided. Staff are quite proud of this, and definitely the community is voting with their feet. We have seen ridership increase, year-over-year increase. Most recently has been 5%, considerably faster than population growth, and very impressive considering a national backdrop of ridership declines in many other transit systems in other cities throughout the country. 3% is actually our paratransit, door-to-door service increasing. That means a lot as well. I could go on about numbers. As some folks in the room know, I'm a bit of a quant and I like facts. I could tell you about customer satisfaction ratings in the mid-80s. Not the mid-1980s, but the mid-80 percentile. I could tell you about 98% of survey respondents letting us know that they think we matter for persons with disabilities. I could tell you about local restaurateurs in downtown Ann Arbor telling us how important labor mobility is for getting people to jobs and helping their businesses thrive. But every one of those numbers is really a human story, and there are a lot of stories behind the services that we provide. And we want to take a moment and sort of recognize that we're talking about people's independence, ability to participate in society, hold a job, go to school, and even meet their family. I remember one touching phone call I got from a grandmother I won't go into, but she was able to see her granddaughter now. I don't know what the circumstance was before the services expanded, but then she could. So that was sort of gets you in the heart, if you know what I mean. We're also a very sound steward of public dollars, very happy with our finances. We've been tightening them up and balancing our budgets for a while now. Years of clean audits, no unfunded liabilities, no debt. And actually tomorrow our board will receive an award for our 2018 budget from the Government Finance Officers Association. So we're very excited about that. As Ms. Sims mentioned, our 5-year renewal is naturally sunsetting in May of 2019. So this August, in the primary election, we will be asking the voters to consider renewing that millage in order to help maintain those services. It is a new renew and replace millage, so it is the same tax rate that voters approved in 2014, the 0.7 mils, and it helps us support and maintain the existing services. Once that millage is hopefully successfully concluded, we're going to begin a long-term planning process tied into, as Mr. Cooper said, the city's master planning process about what's the next great thing for public transit services, and that's probably something that will start in January of next year with public outreach, and hopefully that'll lead us to even bigger and better things. With that, happy to answer any questions the Commission may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess Kayla and I need to explain that, and why don't I, correct me if I'm in error, but we originally were going to look for an endorsement from the commission, and the city attorney's office came back and said, actually, that's not possible because of campaign finance laws, and so we can't officially endorse this millage. But I think it's really important as Transportation Commission members to be aware of what it is and what the impact is and everything else. So it's a peculiar little setback for us, but we can still, if you feel individually that you'd like to support this, then there's things that you can do, and especially direct emailing your friends and family and people in Ann Arbor and reminding them that they need to vote is important. And it just, who's going to be voting in Ann Arbor, outside of Ann Arbor?
The millage is a renewal across all 3 members of our authority, so they'll be voting here in Ann Arbor, in the city of Ypsilanti and Ypsilanti Township.
Great. So sending out, say, 15 or 20 emails at least, that's a pretty impactful way to get out votes in a low vote election. I have a personal opinion, obviously, so.
I share that opinion.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I was hearing you were talking about after this millage renewal, there'd be some kind of service evaluation. I'm wondering, like, what and when, like, the time frame would that be for that? Because I know there are a lot of, like, I know on the west side of town they made a lot of changes in the plan, but not so much on the east side of town, and I feel like there are areas that are underserved. I think North Campus stands out for me because, like, there are no frequent routes that directly go to the main North Campus. And yeah, well, there are blue buses, but not AAA TA buses. And like, there are a lot of routes that are pretty frequent that are like on the outskirts, but don't actually connect directly. And it's like, you hear like people trying to get from Plymouth Road, Green Road area apartments to North Campus, and it's not exactly the most intuitive or convenient. And I'm also wondering if there's ever been talk about rebalancing the hours, because like right now, day peak service is pretty good in a lot of routes, but off-peak, particularly weekends and non-existent holidays, has always been, I mean, I know they expanded the service hours on Saturdays, but aside from that, it's been, you get once an hour buses on Sunday, and there's been it just never, all routes are like that, and it's just the way it is. And I'm wondering if there's been thoughts of increasing that, or looking at what could possibly be done and seeing where there might be unproductive service that could be cut.
Certainly. We have an ongoing continuous improvement process in our planning, and we welcome comments such as this, which I'll take back to the planning group this evening, or maybe tomorrow morning. I suspect they've gone home. We're always interested in hearing how things could be made better. In terms of a formal process, we're looking to start something in January, and we're very interested in community feedback. We don't have plans exactly yet for what that would look like, but we can expect public meetings and full-bore social media outreach to try to hear from people what are the needs, what are the gaps that they may perceive in our service, how could we improve it, and then look at, is there any opportunity to reshuffle resources to better serve the community. So look for that in January.
Okay, yeah.
Great. Yes, Eli.
So I think it's important to really take a moment and reflect on what we just heard about in terms of promises made and promises kept and increased ridership. Now that's great for the authority to say. Now on behalf of my role as city staff and looking at what we as a community were looking for from AATA and now the AAATA, is it's part of what makes Ann Arbor work. The fact that we have a world-class transportation authority right here in our midst, and we provide support for that. It returns our support with exceptional service, both the peak hour service and the all-day service. Part of what the millage did was it extended our service, the AAATA service, later into the evenings and on the weekends, enabling more of the benefits to accrue to the individuals that ride the service as well as the community as a whole. The AAATA, over the past several years, as they were expanding the program, they embraced a sustainability framework, and that they look at a triple bottom line of the environment and the economy as well as the business that they're running. And I think that's important, because this is not merely a transit operator that's moving buses around, but it's doing it in sync with the values of our community. And I think that's fundamentally important. When we hear about ridership going up, I'd like for you to think about the other side of that. That means people are getting to where they need to go. Primarily, the alternative is auto travel, because the transit trips are not the short half-mile walk or 2 to 3 mile bicycle trip, which, oh, by the way, also benefit from having the AAATA have a more robust and broader footprint, because it allows for more people to get on and off the bus. And last time I checked, virtually 100% of all transit riders either begin or end their trip as a pedestrian, which puts it right into our active transportation sweet spot. I'm going to stop there because I serve on the AAATA board, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to work with such a great program. And I would hope that as the folks who are at home listen to the staff talk about promises kept, they realize that those promises kept serve our community and help us to achieve our overall community goals and objectives. So I'd like to take the moment, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak, and to thank the CEO, Matt, for continuing the gold level service that we have here in Ann Arbor, and I wish you well with your millage campaign.
It occurs to me that, similar to Cyrus, I should disclose that I'm a former intern of the AATA.
I
But
hear
it-
you're an excellent company. There
But
are
it was
many around town.
1974, when it was the dial ride service, and I was a student at community high school. So it's been 44 years. I can probably not under the influence anymore, but that was a great experience. Any other comments? All right, thank you very much
Thank you.
for the presentation. We'll be tracking that. So we come towards the end.
In the
Yes,
spirit of Deb, cut mine in half from 2 minutes to 1 minute. Good luck, but,
see if
so
we
with that.
cooperate with you.
Yep, so with that, I'm really just going to point out new items in the report to draw people's attention, both the commission as a whole and the public. Key new items, we have item on North Maple Road restriping. That is brand new to the report. Jackson Avenue crosswalk, a new item added, so draw your attention there, as well as a section on road diets where staff is looking at locations where we can perform that, where that's possible. And those were the new ones, and then a couple of key things, just to point out one that's been a key project, but a fairly major change on the Allen Creek berm opening. That project's been kind of delayed due to negotiations for easements, and so it's noted in the report that we're anticipating that to move to next spring of 2019. The funding is still there. It's just been moved back to next spring, but is still moving forward. And just one other particular item of interest, I want to point out to the commission as well as the community that the Ann Arbor STEAM Safe Routes to School project notes a public meeting is scheduled for June 26th, so coming up next week here in the City Hall chambers at 6 o'clock, so if that's of interest to anyone. So I don't know if I hit a minute,
That
but
was
I tried.
great.
Any quick questions for me?
If I could, a comment on North Maple, we actually had a public speaker on that very issue, and the responsiveness is very appreciated. So, thank you.
Thanks, I will take that back.
Any other quick questions or comments? I appreciate the overview.
Sorry, of course, I have to say something. I don't think we've not talked.
No,
at one of
no,
these.
I was waiting for it.
I noticed the STEAM Safe Routes to School project is starting to ramp up, including staff currently working on a preliminary design. I'm hoping that I might be able to get involved somehow, as my presentation from a long time ago was about school safety, and Northside was the primary example of some of the ideas that also fit with traffic calming, and, you know, I don't want to be the thorn in the paw of staff, but so be it.
You have a strong interest.
So-
I'll make sure Kayla holds me to circling back to the staff, because I've forgotten for the moment who that is, but I'll make sure that we circle back and make sure that's known, that interest is known.
Thank you, guys.
Any other comments? There's a lot going on. All right,
Okay.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Very timely. Do we have individual commissioner reports? Okay, I wonder if we have liaison reports. Is there any updates on the Miller Road fatality? I'm wondering, Officer.
Yeah, we did complete the investigation on the, it was the April 13th traffic crash on Miller with Mrs. Siebert. We did submit that to the prosecutor's office. They did review it, and there was, we did not find any fault on the driver's part, and the prosecutor's office agreed with us. So May 31st, they denied any criminal charges against the driver. We also had the bicyclist that rode into the side of the lift vehicle on March 18th. That was also, the driver was not at fault in that crash as well. I would like to note that the bicyclist did not look very well when I saw him a couple days after the crash. He has made a remarkable recovery. I don't think he was wearing a helmet at the time, but he has some memory loss. But other than that, he's going to be 100% here shortly. So I was very pleased to hear that. And if you want a changing driver behavior update, we did finish that last week. and numbers are about the same as last October, November. Not a dramatic difference in stops or tickets or anything like that. So, not as many vocal people yelling at me about the program. So that was good
That's
for
an
me.
improvement. Any other reports from people who are liaisons on the commission? Okay. Then we're talking about the next agenda items. And leftover from last month, Stephanie had asked that we relook at the crosswalk law. And if you remember, that was partly resolved by Eli Cooper doing a little impromptu presentation about stopping when it's a divided highway and on one half. Is there interest in bringing that up at a future meeting? And if so, we would need to have somebody be responsible for bringing it up and also a proposal or a possible action.
I don't know about the second part, but I think it was with specificity to where within the street the pedestrian has to be in order for the car to have obligation to stop. And just, I think it was a matter of confusing language more than it was police enforcement or interpretation of the law.
That, if I could, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, that was one of the comments that we did hear in making traffic stops on drivers, is they were confused by those that did know about the ordinance were confused by some of the language. So if the commission did do that, I would certainly recommend the city attorney be involved.
I think the only complaint I hear about the crosswalk law is the confusing nature of language, and if it's a matter of clarifying what we mean, and that will hopefully put to rest the cultural differences about the crosswalk ordinance, I think it'd be time well spent. But I am one voice of, how big is this commission? 15 members?
18.
18 members.
So
It's the
there's
same
some.
size as the Seattle Planning
So we're
Commission.
not going to debate that question right now, but the question is whether to have it on a future agenda item, and I'm hearing a little bit of interest in that.
I think it's a little bit of clarifying work that could go a long way to bridging a gap in the community.
Okay, so we will look at that for a future agenda item. Are there other items? This is your opportunity, as well as in between meetings, to let us know. Okay, then we'll proceed with the work plan that we have. And that point, if there is no objection, then I will call us adjourned.
If we can just announce the next meeting date for any viewers at home.
Yes.
Our next meeting will be held on July 18th, Wednesday, July 18th, at 7:00 PM in City Hall Council Chambers. Looks like our agenda topic currently shows on the work plan, connected vehicles, a presentation from Umtree. So coming back to us to continue that discussion. There may be other agenda items, but to be determined. And now
All
I
right.
think we're safe to adjourn.
There we go.